Hello everybody, hope you're having a fantastic day today. So in this video, I wanted to do something and talk about some automation moves. And I didn't realize that I'd have such fun talking about it until I actually tried it out. But let's just go over it, and then I'll talk about how I applied automation in one of my tracks, and we'll use the example of determination, which is the kind of like Disney theme that I did a while ago. So let me just play through the first little bit of it, and then we can talk about how automation affects it. And then repeats back to the, like it basically loops again. So there we go. So let's talk about what exactly is automation. Automation is essentially when you have control over basically anything that you want to do differently throughout the song. So the most common use of automation would be volume. Okay, so let's say you have a track where you've recorded a whole bunch of parts, but you want some parts to be softer and some parts of it to be louder. Well, in that case, I can just pull up my volume automation command, and I can just go in and then add in by clicking on the line that appears. If I click on it, you can see a little dot there appears. And if I do another one, I can do another dot there, and then I can go inside and actually drag it up and down just like that, And they'll actually affect the volume, or they'll affect the parameter that's already assigned to it. So let me just get rid of those. So in this case, in this track, I actually didn't do too much automation. You see some people doing tons of automation on every single track, which can be necessary if you have things changing everywhere and you need that different feel and different sound every moment. But in this case, when you have an orchestral track, although automation is really necessary, it's not as necessary as in, like, let's say a pop track or anything like that, because you do want those dynamic contrasts throughout the piece. And so for me, I think the most important automation I actually did was down here at the stereo out. And the reason I did that was mainly because if you listen through what we just listened through, the entire dynamic level was relatively consistent. So it didn't pop up, it didn't go down. Like, one of my pet peeves is when you're listening to a track, sometimes you have to click louder or softer while you're listening to it, and that just kind of annoys me a little bit. So what I tried to do was make the overall volume of the track as consistent as possible. And these little adjustments, if I just scroll in a little bit, you can see, so it starts off at 0 dB, and then I literally brought it down just negative 1.2 decibels, and that's just getting into the chorus. So you still get the feel of the build into the chorus. I felt that if I didn't do this automation, it would be too loud. So let me see what happens if I actually bring it back. So let's just see there. So now this is as if I didn't change the volume of the end of the bridge at all. And I mean, that is nice, but I felt that I got a little more control when I actually brought it back down. And then I could take the time after this chorus, because I found that the chorus, or the B section, or the C section, you could say, was louder than the verse part right here. So I brought it back down about negative 1 dB just to match it a little more with the verse. And then when it got back to the verse, when it looped, then I brought it back to back to 0 dB, so then I could make it consistent again, and then the verse would be back at the regular level. So for me, that was the most important part. Now these other ones are really just little tiny adjustments. Like for example, here I decided to make the snare minus 11.7 decibels just to keep it at that volume throughout. And then here, sometimes when you want a volume fade out, it's just a really good idea just to automate and then just drag it down so that fades away. You know? So it doesn't end so suddenly when it reaches the end of the section. You know, it's nice and subtle, right? Let's look for one where there's actually a little more going on. Again, automation isn't for drastic differences. It's really just to even everything out. And this doesn't just apply to volume as well. You can do it to panning, you can do it to like EQ, compression, reverbs, delays. It's whatever you actually want to manually control in the track. So what's this one here? I think this is a melody in the violins. So you can see I manually wrote some expression there, some volume there to make it a little more expressive. Because as players, as string players, you naturally want to swell as you're playing, and then as you reach the end of a phrase, you naturally want to go back down. Just like anybody, like a vocalist, for example, when you sing, right? You grow as you're singing, like do, re, mi, and then as you finish off, you decrescendo, or you get lower in volume. So that's quite natural with string players. Let's take a couple more examples here. Okay, so like here, for example, you have piccolo, some playable runs here. Where does it actually come in? I can't even find it. Right, so that I just made a little bit softer because I didn't want it to stick out so much. But for example, somewhere over here, I wanted it to stick out more. And so it's all a balancing act. And then, okay, for a final example, I'll just use this orchestral tremolo right here. So let's have a listen to that. Is the woodwind still soloed? Yes, it is. Okay. And by the way, this is kind of the secret sauce to when I'm building tension coming out from a bridge or something. Tremolos are very, very useful. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let's just hear what this sounds like. and then in context. Oops. That's at that volume. And then here you can see here was -13, and then here I actually lowered it down to -17 because with the accumulation of sound, it grows and grows and grows, and I didn't want this to overpower everything else, so I had to drag the volume down for this part. Right, so if that was too loud, then it would definitely pop up and be noticeable, and that's something we don't want. We want all the elements to work together and nothing to stand out. As a listener, we want to hear the whole picture, right? We don't want to see, oh, this thing is too loud, or I noticed this thing that just pops out of nowhere. I didn't notice it before, but you know, that's doesn't sound that great. We want everything just to be seamless and flowing, and automation does play a huge role in that. And I think traditionally, we do this after EQ compression and stuff. After we've actually affected the tone of the sounds and we've actually balanced the input-output volume levels and all that, automation is kind of like the final touch that you do throughout the piece just to ensure that nothing is sticking out, or yeah, like nothing is, there's no problem areas or nothing bothering the listener. So yeah, anyway, that is just a little look at how I automate a track, specifically a cinematic orchestral track like this. Overall, I try not to do too much if because I'm already doing volume balancing at the very beginning. The orchestral instruments will be relatively consistent in volume, because if I wanted something completely drastically different, then it would probably be a different articulation, and then I'd probably put it on a separate track. And then I wouldn't use automation for that. I'd probably just go to that individual track and change the volume itself. But in this case, I do my best to only use automation when really necessary, just to make everything fit together really, really nicely, right? So yeah, for me, the biggest thing I did here was on the stereo out, because without these little tweaks, I found myself having to click louder and click softer on my headphones, and that's something, like I said, I don't really want to do. So that was kind of the final test. After I finished the mix, then I put on these headphones, because I knew that I would be listening to these on regular headphones, or other people would, right? Then, I put these on and then listened throughout, and then figured out what was too loud and what was too soft, and then I basically accordingly played with the volume from there. And that's it. So yeah, honestly, the main difference between volume changing and volume balancing and stuff versus automation is that in automation, you can choose specific points at which you want to affect the volume, or whatever you're trying to affect. With traditional volume balancing, you can only affect that fader, and then it affects the entire track that you're selecting. So automation is really great for that. And then it's called automation because the system automatically does it for you once you've inputted that data of what you want to do with the volume. So pretty interesting. Anyway, that is it. So that is automation for this track determination. As I do more tracks in the future, I really want to discuss other things too, but automation will definitely be included in there. So thank you very much for watching, guys. If you have any comments or any questions about it, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And actually, I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are on hearing different volumes throughout the track, because obviously for a regular orchestral track, there is a lot of dynamic contrast, especially in classical music and when you have a full orchestra, right? So sometimes we do want those dynamic contrasts. But me personally, because this is more of an epic heroic style and I want to hear everything in my face the whole time, I tend to keep it at a relatively stable volume. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. So yeah, okay, anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.